I am a certified arborist out of Pittsburgh, working for Northwood Tree Care. I'm one of the co-chairs of the UEC, along with David Meshulam out of Boston, who unfortunately can't make it today. And we're excited to announce that Erica Holm, our wonderful speaker today, is also going to be joining us on our board of co-chairs. So Erica, welcome. We're so excited to have you and looking forward to hearing everything that you have to say today and learning more about you. For those of you who don't know, the Urban Ecology Collaborative is a group of groups and urban greeners all across the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. We get together every month on the third Wednesday at 10 a.m. to talk about our successes, our failures, developments in the field, and just generally support each other in the work that we do. If you have any questions throughout today's presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat box or save them until the end. Are there any announcements this morning before we get started? All right, sounds like probably not. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Erica Holm to speak to us today about urban ecology in Boston and early career perspective. Erica is Mass Audubon's first urban ecologist. She's a Boston resident who spent the last few years coordinating urban forestry projects in the 1,100-acre Emerald Necklace Park system. She previously studied wildlife and conservation biology at the University of New Hampshire, worked as a freelance GIS and forest data analyst, taught naturalism classes, and completed a summer forestry internship in Central Maine. Erica always works where humans and nature intersect, but she also plays there. She lives in Roslindale with her rescue dog and her best friend Mango, and her two large collection of vinyl records and urban ecology books. So welcome, Erica. We're very excited to hear your presentation. And you can go ahead and share your screen and get started whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here today, and that's a little preview of an activity we'll be doing. Hopefully folks can participate later on in the presentation. Thanks for the introduction, Kinsey. Can everyone see my screen title slide?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great, thanks. So I love the Urban Ecology Collaborative. It's something I've been participating in for about a year, and I'm really excited that you all came to hear me speak today. I might be a little bit rusty on presentation skills. I haven't given a presentation since I was in graduate school, but let's just dive right in. So my objectives with this talk are to talk about my own career pathway, to try to stir up some insights of what getting to the urban ecologist job title might be like for folks now in the United States, at least. A little intro to Mass Audubon and what this role is so far and what it will be in the future. And then I have a bunch of example projects. I'll probably have to go through them pretty quickly, but we can return to any one at any time if folks are curious about them. They mainly have to do with ecological management in urban settings, public-private partnerships, experiences that I've seen or participated in. And one of the main objectives I want to talk about today is supportive environmental employment. I see Jesse Scott in the audience. I'm really excited that you're here, Jesse. Supportive environmental employment is a term that I've been using to reflect green jobs that not only support the natural spaces in urban areas that we're trying to conserve, but that also help individuals. So living wages, jobs that actually help them grow, and experiences that are really holistically good for people in cities all around. So I have an activity related to that where I want to hear from you all what your advice is for early career professionals. That can be young people or also people who are new to the urban ecology or urban forestry fields later in their lives. So if you can think through this presentation about what your number one piece of advice would be for someone entering into a career that's like yours, we'll do a Jamboard at the end. And I'm also have a slide or a Jamboard activity page in there for good experiences you've had. So if you can think of some of those really highlight memories that young people could look forward to when they enter a career like this, we will have a chance to share later on. So before I get to any of that, this is kind of what my career path has looked like. I grew up in Southern New Hampshire and I had pretty fair degree of privilege. So I always like to mention that because my roots in supportive environmental employment and my interest in that aspect of green workforce development, wraparound services, holistic things are because if any part of my life had been less privileged, I wouldn't really have been able to make it through some of these experiences I had. So I started at the University of New Hampshire in 2012 as a natural resource, wildlife, and conservation biology major. I fell in love with it instantly, and I graduated in 2016 with a Bachelor's of Science in that degree, which in itself is a huge step in a green career. During that time, 2014, my first internship was actually a timber harvesting internship at Plum Creek Timber in Bingham, Maine. So central Maine. I was 18. I had no idea what I was doing. I just had accepted this job. I actually like to say that and explain to people that I got a lot of feedback not to take that internship because I was a wildlife conservationist. So why would I be going and roaming about in a timber harvesting setting, big clear cuts in Maine? But I was actually responsible for their regeneration survey project that year. I did get to participate in bridge sizing and culvert replacement trainings up there and stormwater like best practices for maintaining logging roads. I never thought that would be useful to me. And then I got in the city and I was like, this is one of the main components of what an urban ecologist has to think about is water running all over the place. Up there, there's a lot more room to deal with things. And I also got to watch their sustainable forestry initiative audit and participate in that and see some wildlife biologists and some foresters interacting and almost butting heads in some ways. And I got to tour the paper mill, which was a really good introduction to the history and culture of Maine and how they relied so heavily on forest products and the paper mill industry, but how over time, economically and just due to the changes in our society, that whole industry has really seen a lot of changes. So that internship was really valuable to me, even though it was only one summer. I did go back to the University of New Hampshire and I did 3 years of a master's. I was researching songbirds in human managed landscapes. So transmission line rights of way, gravel pits, old fields, and privately owned clear cuts. We had about 100 sites from Saco, Maine to kind of about like Hampton, New Hampshire, and then west to Bow, New Hampshire. So we had a lot of different variety there. We worked with 98 different species of birds. The bird in that picture is alive and well, was released very shortly after the picture was taken, but that's a photo of songbird banding. So I know that not everybody here is a wildlife and conservation biologist, but you probably have heard of this activity, and we were really seeking to see how those forestry changes were influencing or not influencing shrubland and forest obligate bird species throughout that range. The third year of that experience was not paid. It was a grant funded master's. So I was living in Boston already, and I think I only made about $10,000 that year. And this was, I think, 2018 that happened. And I financially couldn't continue for an extra semester, which was what my kind of advisors had been asking of me. So I actually had to leave the university without getting the paper degree. So I do not have a master's of science. There was also some issue with mentorship and structural setup of that program for me. I had an advisor who wasn't on the graduate faculty, and there was some absenteeism involved. So I really felt like I had an experience where I needed to take what I had learned and move on to something more positive where I could receive mentorship. And so I'm really grateful for Spatial Informatics Group, my first experience working for a nonprofit, where John Gunn had employed me to do a kind of freelance an old forest data analysis project, also a carbon crediting calculation for a facility out west that switched from natural gas power to biomass fuel, and a Hawaii land use project. So I got some diverse experiences freelancing on the side to support me through that time of kind of a financial living in Boston on $10,000 is not ideal. And then I had imposter syndrome from not having received my master's degree. So I thought that I needed to get a job and restart in the environmental field. And the reason I'm telling this part of the story is just, again, like imagine us, someone who was not from this background or who didn't have a bachelor's of science already, or who didn't have a mentor through their master's as well. I mean, there's other folks who've had this experience. They might leave the green industry. If there was any less privilege involved in my situation, I certainly would have left kind of right at this juncture over here between this freelancing and the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. But luckily, the Emerald Necklace Conservancy in Boston did have an opening that normally goes for a Northeastern sophomore. It's their co-op position, their visitor center assistant. That was the job I ended up taking. I thought I didn't have any natural resource management skills that I could use. I wasn't aware of urban forestry. And I really didn't have that solid, like, inspirational person who was like guiding me along and showing me access to resources to get that job. But then when I started at the Emerald Necklace, I saw that they had field operations, and their field operations manager, Ellen Arnstein. She's now urban and community forestry out in Seattle. She's great. We should get in touch with her maybe to present soon. But she was managing the Emerald Necklace's tree care program. And when she left in June of 2020, I really stepped up and said, like, I can do this. Just, I'm going to take that job and learn urban forestry in 2 years. So that's why this presentation is from an early career perspective, is because I've only been working in urban forestry specifically for about 2 years, 2.5 now. And in January of this year, I was lucky enough to stumble across the posting for Urban Ecologist at Mass Audubon. And you can tell from the picture here that this is at Drumlin Farm in Lincoln, Mass. I was thrilled to get this position. This is essentially my dream job title. It was a substantial raise for me to also move jobs at this time. So that's one component to think about. But the main takeaway from my career pathway to the rest of this presentation is that because my experience included a time where I thought I was going to have to leave this industry and where I didn't know about urban forestry, I'm hoping that the audience and that we can all just kind of take something from that, of thinking about, like, what about that inner city Boston youth who might be an exceptional field operations manager, who might make for, like, the world's best forester, but just doesn't have connection to mentors, or just has slightly less access to natural resources. Can they actually get into a job like this? So I'm looking to pay it forward, and I hope we can consider that as we go through. So I spent a long time on that, but I have one slide about the Emerald Necklace because I work for Mass Audubon now, so I mainly focus on Mass Audubon. But urban forestry and the Emerald Necklace is a significant part of my career pathway. They have an Olmsted Tree Society tree care matching program where the Emerald Necklace Conservancy uses private donations and matches dollar for dollar with the State Department of Conservation and Recreation, the City of Boston Parks and Recreation Department, and the Town of Brookline's Forestry Division on tree care specifically. It's been about $5 million invested into the tree care in the about 1,100 acre Emerald Necklace over the past 5 years, when I last checked, which is probably 6 years now. But they do have a 10,000 tree inventory that I was managing. I was only able to manage that because of my freelance ArcGIS experiences. And there is a project that I started that's sort of like my baby. May not seem impressive to a lot of y'all who I know, some of you are tree wardens or folks who manage thousands of trees, but we were able to plant 20 trees over the past 2 years on Arbor Day with high school youth in green jobs training programs in different organizations in Franklin Park. It was a lot harder than it actually looks because Franklin Park is part of the Emerald Necklace, which is a historically preserved landmark in Boston. So every single tree has to go through the Boston Landmarks Commission. We did need to be aware of the Franklin Park Action Plan, which is a $28 million investment into this park. We didn't want to plant trees that were going to be taken out immediately due to a capital project. But these 6 trees over on the left of your screen are the 26 of the 2022 Arbor Day plantings that we did. Here are some pictures of the youth actually helping to dig the holes for that. And then this picture is a watering truck. In 2021, I hand watered the 2021 10 Arbor Day trees in Franklin Park using 5-gallon Poland Springs jugs. And in 2022, by 2022, I was able to advocate for and get the Conservancy to purchase this Ford F-250. It has a 300-gallon space-saving Gregson Clark sprayer in the back of it that can, it can actually do more than what's needed, but this can shuttle water to our new trees. This YLP Plants Trees, or Youth Leadership Plants Trees project, is really a pilot in best practices for urban tree planting in park settings in Boston. I have seen projects with pretty dismal establishment rates in this park system. One that had an establishment rate, or well, there had to be more than half of their initial project replaced before the warranty was out, and there still is some trees are still dying from one of those projects. So this was supposed to be an example that youth could get involved in, that they could feel agency on. So you can see there's signs on each tree that lead to the website about this. This was really a project that I'm going to keep looking at, even if I'm not working at the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, and show that community tree stewardship is possible and community tree planting can be done up to really good arborist specifications. You just have to have some good project management in place. And this truck down here is really an opportunity as well. This truck is not supposed to water hundreds and hundreds of trees. It's not going for quantity. This is an opportunity for park ambassadorship from the Emerald Necklace Conservancy and the partners in the tree care program. It's also an opportunity for green workforce development. I see this truck being used by Power Corps Boston, which I'll talk about later, in its future, or other trainees in arboriculture or urban forestry. They could come and work, and as part of their experience on the Emerald Necklace's youth program, they can actually use a piece of equipment, but not something that requires heavy permitting or certifications, not something that's incredibly dangerous, kind of an easy way to introduce people to the field. So let's talk about where I actually work now. So who is Mass Audubon? I know that a lot of folks may not be familiar with Mass Audubon. So our mission is to protect the nature of Massachusetts for people and wildlife. And we've been working on this for over 125 years. Mass Audubon was started before the National Audubon Society, and it's an independent affiliate of the National Audubon Society. Sorry, it was started by two women in 1896 who were fighting to preserve birds in their communities. We have now over 140,000 members, 14,000 volunteers, and we've protected over 40,000 acres in Massachusetts. Here's just a map of kind of some of our sanctuaries. In yellow are the Mass Audubon sanctuaries that have nature centers or significant year-round or summer programming. You may be familiar with some of these. This actually will be updated in the future to include some partnerships we have in the North Shore around Lowell and Lawrence right now, and which I'll talk about later, but this just gives a sense for where we operate. We have an action agenda for 2021 to 2026 that's extremely ambitious. We're really excited about it. This framework took the goals of interconnectedness with everything that we do and creating one Mass Audubon into account. So with a staff that goes up to over 900 people throughout the year and an operating budget around $30 million, we do have a lot going on. And to create one Mass Audubon, we really need these umbrella goals to be working towards as a team. So our goals are protecting and stewarding resilient landscapes. I mainly work in goal number 2, which is advancing inclusive and equitable access to nature. And then goal number 3 is sort of our advocacy effort, which is to mobilize to fight climate change. I do have slides for each of the goals, but I'm going to skip over this for time. I'm going to focus on goal number 2, which is advancing inclusive and equitable access to nature. This is where we really are seeking to listen and engage and meet communities where they're at. Mass Audubon is not trying to come in and say things about urban communities that are like new or that aren't the lived experience of the individuals that live there. We're seeking to bring any resources that we can to those communities to increase accessibility to urban nature education and access to nature in communities. I think everyone here recognizes the public health implications of increasing urban green spaces in our cities. And we would really like to contribute in any way that we can to reducing the disparities in environmental access that happen in urban spaces in Massachusetts. So we have an ambitious goal to create 20 new urban green spaces by 2026. That could include land acquisitions and establishment of new urban wildlife sanctuaries. It also includes conservation restrictions and significant advances in programming or ecological restoration on sites that we don't own. So partnership urban green spaces are part of that. part of our goal too, that's not based on land, is really based on people, and it's increasing participation of those who typically have not been able to like go to a summer camp where they're playing in the river, go to a summer camp where they're climbing trees, or learning about urban forestry before they ever would even need to know that term. So we're looking to really significantly fund and increase programming for low-income families and communities of color that we recognize have not been able to participate in the past as much as suburban and rural populations, and mainly white populations have been able to experience in cities. Again, goal number 3 is about advocacy. So that I do work a little bit in policy, but more at the local level, but I just wanted to include all 3 of our goals here. So this slide I should spend a long time on, but I'm trying to get to the part where y'all can give me some feedback and some of your opinions. So the role of an urban ecologist, this is a brand new thing in the conservation science department at Mass Audubon. The conservation science department has 15 other ecologists, so I was thrilled to join this team because I knew it was an opportunity for me to work directly with scientists that I idolized and looked up to, who had done river restorations. One person on my team is responsible for a large part of the Tidmarsh ecological restoration in the South Shore, where 9 dams were removed. It's the largest freshwater ecological restoration in Massachusetts. And so I was super excited to join this team. And this investment in creating the role of an urban ecologist and being willing to explore that as a full-time position for someone, I think it just really shows Mass Audubon's commitment to this industry, the industry of urban forestry, but also urban public health and urban ecology just more broadly. And so in this role, I'll be working mainly on a program that we're calling Nature in the City. And it has to do with that 20 urban green spaces by 2026 goal, but it also includes all of the other things on goal number 2. So my goals with it so far are to listen and engage with urban communities and build networks in new cities that I haven't worked in before, maximize the ecological function of urban green spaces. So I do lead some site restorations that I will have as examples in a few minutes here. And then just advancing research, practice, and science communication. That's not something I do alone. That's something that in partnership with you all and other folks in my network, connecting people with the science that they need in their urban communities. I've had a lot of requests about air quality recently. I'm not an air quality expert, so my role in that is then to find out, well, who is the urban air quality expert, or where is that research gap that we can then communicate with the university about, to get that answer for that community member where it concerns their health. There's a lot of other things here. Community science is something I'm really interested in. So encouraging use of iNaturalist, but also new apps that come out, Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities, getting to a place where folks can plant trees with us is a big goal of mine. And education and advocacy are also parts of this role. So nature in the city is a phased approach. You can't just start and say like, okay, every single city in Massachusetts, like I've become an urban ecologist, I now have experience with all of them. So Mass Audubon is starting out with where we have worked before. So the Boston Nature Center has been active in Boston for over 20 years. It's a really great example of urban sustainable buildings, and also it's pretty much the only urban wildlife sanctuary that's officially designated as a wildlife sanctuary in Boston. So we're really proud of that. And then in Cambridge and Lowell, these are other cities where folks at Mass Audubon have been working regionally for a long time, and also where we see some opportunities to immediately partner and to immediately learn and take notes and exchange information between cities. So Boston, Cambridge, and Lowell are my focuses right now. But phase 2 includes Lawrence, Worcester, New Bedford, Fall River, and Springfield, which are other large cities in Massachusetts. This is not exclusionary. There are other cities that I've focused on for specific things that have come up over the first few months of my role here. So it's not an exclusionary thing, but much like our goals for the organization, we do have a goal of creating substantial impact in these cities over the next few immediate years. So we'll go right into my example projects, and I'm going to do a time check. So 10:30. So I really have to hurry through these. I'm sorry, everyone. I spent too much time talking, as I always do. But this is one of the site restorations that I designed and led in my first few months at Mass Audubon. And it's a solar ground mount that was installed at the Boston Nature Center. This is not a place where trees were cleared for solar installation. This was a brownfield site. There used to be a Boston State Hospital building on this site. And then it had, you can find bricks and all kinds of things in the soil here. And then it had kind of become overgrown with multiflora rose and oriental bittersweet. And you can see some tansy, which is an allelopathic plant that takes over large meadows that have been disturbed. And our goal is to create a pollinator field for wildlife here. So we're planting over 3,000 plugs of native perennials. We planted over 100 shrubs as a shrub border that will flower at different times of year. And we did all of this with volunteers. So this is really a from scratch project that we've documented every stage of, and that we can show people, like say they have a bunch of traditional lawn in their landscape that's privately owned. We can show them how to create an environmentally friendly pollinator field and give them guides on what species to use and how long they might have to wait, or what the process might be like. We're expecting this to take about 3 years to really show what has been fully done, because the plants take a while to establish and the seeds take a while to grow. So I'm really proud of that one, put a lot of time on that. Another example project is the Canterbury Brook in Boston. So up in the top right corner, you can see that the Canterbury Brook, which flows east to west, is culverted in the red sections, and it's daylit in the blue section here, which runs through the Boston Nature Center property. This eventually connects with the Stony Brook after it gets out of conduit down to the south. So this is the Boston Nature Center property. The solar field is right here, the building is right here, and the Canterbury Brook runs through the wildlife sanctuary at the back. The brook itself is owned by the State Department of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance. And so we have to work even on our property in partnership with many different partners, including DCAM, including Boston Water and Sewer, including the Boston Parks Department, and also these private landowners of the daylit portions, to really keep this brook flowing the way that it should be, and to improve the health of this urban waterway, which is an extremely difficult thing to do. Here are some photos of the brook that really remind me of my days learning about bridge sizing and culvert replacement in Maine. There's unfortunately not enough room or ability to put a culvert that's huge over this. And also, if you change the size of this bridge / culvert, you change the flow conveyance, which could impact the environmental justice communities around this river. So this river is one of the projects where we know that we have about 5 feet of sediment building up in here that change the flow conveyance. And then we have significant amounts. I mean, this picture was taken just about a week after this brook had been cleaned. So we have a lot of trash coming in from American Legion Highway and the surrounding roadways that go into this water body, and it affects the whole watershed. So this is a project that I'm working on. Where it crosses over with trees is that due to the different flooding and different water conditions and the bank conditions and the invasive plants on the banks at times, we have a lot of trees falling into the brook. You can see a big log here where that happened. We don't fully know how we're going to address everything about this, this tree water community issue, but this is one of the big partnership projects that I'm looking forward to finding solutions for, including retention of the trees along the banks and doing stream bank restoration using trees as much as we can to make this a healthier place for everyone. Another example project is Crane Ledge Woods. This is a 14-acre site. I did the iTree canopy assessment on this site to help the community establish and be able to communicate with the mayor and the Parks Department how much value in terms of forested land this parcel is contributing to Boston before development. The development proposed is on the left. It's 9 freestanding 3-story buildings. And the whole woods here, Crane Ledge Woods, is about 24 acres, which is equivalent to what the Parks Department reports for having been able to add to the tree canopy across the city over the past few years. They say they've been able to contribute about 24 acres of woodlands. So in my head, I go, well, if we develop then 24 acres of woodlands that already are providing tree canopy to an environmental justice neighborhood, we're kind of we're not advancing tree canopy goals in our city. We're kind of taking steps backwards. So this is an example in real time. This is happening now. Of how you lose trees on private property and where an urban ecologist might fit into that. I've mainly been providing site analyses and reviewing draft project implementation reports for this, and engaging in community meetings with the Crane Ledge Woods Coalition and other community partners to try to save this parcel. Let's go over to Cambridge for a second. So Magazine Beach in Cambridge, we have partnered with DCR to actually open the old powder house for programming at Magazine Beach. I highly recommend checking that out. And there's a lot of traditional lawn at this site, so maybe converting some of that to woodland is something we're thinking about doing. There's no set plans right now, but that's another type of project that I get involved in. And I'm really excited about this one. This one's in Lowell. Rowley's Farm is the last farm in Lowell. It is protected under, I think it's Chapter 61A as an agricultural place. This could be theoretically developed, but instead, Mill City Grows, the Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust, and Mass Audubon are partnering to create an urban wildlife sanctuary and also an urban agriculture site at this property. There is some thought and some talk about a tree nursery, and I can certainly envision myself an urban tree nursery being a part of this site design. So we'll see where we get with that. But right now, my role is to write the first ecological management report for this property to help us with assessing what's there, what's the condition. You can see there's a lot of white pines that have been limbed up on this property with Christmas tree farm underneath. So looking at what that will become. Here's a couple other things about that site. It's right near the Lowell Drake at Tingsboro State Forest. So there's some really good wildlife habitat connectivity opportunities going on here. And here's an image of some of the wetlands and the woodland type on the back of this site, kind of towards the north. So preserving these in an urban area, it's not downtown, but this is still within Lowell, and this is still an important place to conserve. So now we're getting to the part that I really want to work on, which is what is supportive environmental employment? So I talked about Jesse Scott earlier in this conversation. We actually worked together to fund an intern with Atlanta's Greening Youth Foundation and the U.S. Forest Service, Stephen Lynn, who's also a teacher naturalist at Mass Audubon right now. We worked on this concept of supportive environmental employment as not just equitable access to a green job as it's typically been defined, but also kind of equitable treatment of individuals within green jobs and an expansion of what a green job means. A lot of times I would hear green job and I would be seeing that framed as like someone who's doing landscaping. But I think we all know that a green job is much more than that, and that specific types of jobs could lead to economic outcomes for individuals that are much more positive than what they grew up with. For example, if someone could learn ArcGIS and become a GIS analyst, that's a green job, and they may end up being able to support their family to a greater degree if they have that type of experience. So supportive environmental employment would include expanded services and support for people who are working in green jobs, trainings, wraparound services, access for people who typically have been excluded from our field. Also, living wage is something that I'm really passionate about. That's not just commensurate with the skill someone's shown in the past, but also the value of their natural resources work. So I'm a really big believer that we need to value our natural resources managers to a greater degree and thank them. It's often the work of having something not happen, right? So the tree didn't get removed, the tree didn't fall down, the tree stayed for 100 years. That's the real value of the work, but it's hard to quantify when something doesn't happen. And then I'm really big on mentorship and active creation of ways forward. So are we guiding people to be able to help us towards our goals that we're working on? Are we creating jobs for them that are new and that explore new technologies and advance our science in our field? So here's just an image from the maintenance collaborative at the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. This was a program for pre-release individuals at the Rosendale Center where they could come out and help out in Boston parks. From 2005 to 2017, this program ran. It was not a fully supportive environmental employment program because I didn't see that it continued sustainably to connect people to green jobs. But I'm really excited about the City of Boston's Power Corps, which is inspired by Philly Power Corps, which is starting this summer. I'm super excited to be partnering with them and actually working with them at the Boston Nature Center as a site. That is a program for individuals 18 to 30 years old who have interest in an urban forestry track. And training in that field, but who, have not been able to, or have not been the typical population that those jobs go to. Other programs for youth mainly include the Emerald Necklace Conservancy's Green Team, Speak for the Trees' Teen Urban Tree Corps, and the Willow Tree Youth Leaders at Mass Audubon. So those Willow Tree Youth Leaders, that's our 3-year paid internship program. So the same individuals stay with us and they're paid for 3 full years. So they get a lot of different well-rounded experiences. We do tree phenology with them on the Harvard Forest type of methodology. They lead programs for us to actually mentor youth that are younger than them. It's a really great thing. And then we have a new program called the Environmental Fellowship Program, created by the absolutely amazing Mia Keith. She's our Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. And we actually had 300 plus applicants for only 5 positions. So we're looking at how to make that more positions of those. The pay and the experience offered with those positions is pretty great. So I'm not trying to brag about the organization, but those are, I think, 18-month positions that have a $50,000 pay attached to them. So it's really an investment in folks to learn about these careers and to learn the difficult skills that they take. So here we are finally at our activity. I'm going to try to switch over and I'm going to put in the chat a link to a Jamboard where I would love it if you're on a computer, if you could please, I'll put it a few times just to make sure. We're going to go to a Jamboard and you should see on your screen when you exit out, and let me know if anyone has any trouble, you should be able to come in here and see a Jamboard. I put some instructions and some questions at the top. Oh, I see everybody here. Thank you so much for joining in. The way you use Jamboard, if you haven't before, is what we're going to do is use this toolbar on the left to click this little icon that looks like a piece of paper, and a little sticky note window comes up. And I would love it if folks could just put any responses to the questions in the top corner, or just your #1 piece of advice for early career urban ecologists into a sticky note. So I'm gonna start with fight imposter syndrome. You see my sticky note appears. So is everybody here? Is everybody seeing this? So you click the sticky button, you type what you like, and then yes, I see someone's added one. Thank you so much. And I'll add a few more too. You can change the color. You can move the little sticky notes around, whatever you feel like doing. And if folks want to unmute and say something out loud, that's okay too. I can also add your advice from that. Oh, and I think someone tried to steal the sticky note icon. That was just a copy of the icon, but the icon that you actually click should be over to the left. You can also use Control-Shift-P to create a new sticky. One thing that I want to just say here, and I just put follow what calls to you, is that I'm working towards an ISA certification. I'm not ISA certified at this time. I don't have experience that actually lines up 100% with getting that. But even though my job title is Urban Ecologist, and there might be other things that I could do, going for arboriculture, that's something that's been really inspirational to me lately. So I really do believe in following, like, if something is calling to you as like something that you want to do, even if there's reasons why you shouldn't do it by traditional standards, still doing it, I think, is hard for young people or early career folks to do. Oh, I love this one. Kindness and keeping up with contacts goes a long way. That is so true. Like the kindness and keep like just staying in touch. It doesn't take that much. Every once in a while, just an email or sending along a picture of something you saw is great. And then, so this is great. Thank you everyone so much for adding this. I'm seeing the field is changing rapidly and there's no career ladder yet. That's really important. I think that a lot of programs that are starting up are really going with this, like, oh, let's just tap into what this career path is. Some of us know that the path is not like one path, and the path is, it needs some trail work. So, creating that career ladder is a really good step. And yeah, finding a good mentor, all experience being applicable. These are great pieces of advice. Thank you so much for contributing. The second page of this Jamboard, if you go to the top and you click over one, you can get to a second page. And this was just something where if you want to, you don't have to, but if you have any uplifting anecdotes or things that you that really inspired you during your career, or something that you really look at as a huge success, I think sometimes early career folks get inspired by what has inspired their mentors. So I don't know if folks can get to the second page, but at the very top in the middle of the screen, there should be a little arrow that says 1 out of 2 in a box, and then 2 out of 2 is uplifting anecdotes. So I'm just going to put planting 20 trees in urban parks with youth. I know, again, 20 trees isn't that much, but it has been my biggest inspiration. So if you feel like adding some anecdotes, you can on the second page of that. Otherwise, I think I hit the mark exactly where I wanted to, and we have about 15 minutes left for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Folks can try to make it back to the Zoom, which might take a minute. And if anyone has questions or comments, I'm happy to chat.
That was an awesome presentation, Erica. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. It's been really interesting as someone who does have a career in the field to see what everyone else's advice is as well. I'm also fairly early in my career path in urban forestry and urban ecology, and I had a lot of similarities in my experience as you did, in having gaps in employment and trying to find how to stay in the field when it felt like it was very challenging. And I know a lot of other young professionals have felt the same. So it's nice to know that you're not alone, and then it also to be here to support other people who are coming up in the field, I think is really important. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Kinsey. It's always great to hear from you. And I think urban forestry as a field, urban ecology, urban forestry, it's similar. But I think that, yeah, there can be those balances. I actually, Kinsey, I got to help as a ground crew member for the first time the other day. And it was just one of those things where it increased my respect so much for ground crew folks that I've hired in the past. So, keeping in mind that, urban planners and folks who are higher up, or quote unquote higher up, I don't know if there really is a ladder like that. But keeping in mind, like, showing them what it actually takes to be a ground crew person for a day. They don't really have time to do those types of details all the time, but that's been really rewarding for me to go, and if I'm going to hire someone to do something, making sure that that's something that I understand what it takes to do that job. And I love what you said about looking for the next generation, because I think even as early career people, we already have a role in kind of helping along people who are coming after us.
Absolutely. And one of the things I meant to write that I didn't put in was to what you said about being on a ground crew. part of why I got into tree care kind of from urban forestry was because I wanted to have that experience to know what folks on tree crews do and how to take care of mature trees, because a lot of the work we do as urban foresters is taking care of and maintaining young trees. And so I think that there is a lot to be said for having that experience and providing opportunities for people who are interested in urban ecology and urban forestry to try out different aspects of the industry, because you never know what will click or what will resonate with you.
Exactly. And I think sometimes, so that reminds me of being at the University of New Hampshire. They had an extraordinary forestry program, and I think they have an urban forestry center up in Portsmouth, different things like that. But when I was there for wildlife and conservation biology, I didn't experience that. And I didn't get exposed to that in the way that ultimately drew me to the urban forestry and arboriculture. Like, it didn't click that I was interested in that until more recently. So repeated exposure as well. And I actually see something in the chat from Corey. Thanks, Corey. A new research article. Ooh, I'm excited about that. Yeah, hey, how are you?
Thanks for your presentation. That was awesome. I feel like I had a kind of similar path, but like maybe like, I guess some 4 years ahead of you or something like that. But yeah, I don't know if anybody here saw this survey that when it was sent around about like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, asking urban forest professionals if they thought that urban forestry needed its own credential. Like, I hear you guys talking a lot about going to arboriculture as a way to like get credentials. I'm an arborist too. And yeah, it's definitely you kind of have to, urban foresters and ecologists have to sort of piecemeal other types of credentials, right? To sort of like signify what expertise you have. But if you're interested, there's an article on whether urban forest professionals think that urban forestry needs its own credential. And we, interestingly for this group too, found that early career professionals were like more likely to say that they thought one was needed than later career, mainly because later career people kind of figured out what their deal is.
I love that, Corey. Thank you so much for sharing. I think I had seen that interview going around, but I didn't know that the paper was out. So that's
it just came out like a month or two ago. So
that's incredible.
Anyone wants like me to email them a PDF, I'm happy to. I can put my email.
Yeah, this is awesome. We'll definitely share that link with the crew when we send out the recording of this.
Awesome.
And I remember taking that survey, so
oh, good.
I've completely forgotten about it. It's really cool to see the paper. I'm excited to read it.
Maybe you're probably one of the early career people, Kenzie, who said that you wanted to. Well, not.
Yeah, probably.
You don't have to say how you responded.
And that's really interesting about a specific urban forestry credential as well, because in working with Power Corps Boston in Boston, as they're setting up this program for individuals who may have been court involved or who may not have, bachelor's degrees, et cetera, sometimes the requirements for credentialing in terms of money, I mean, you probably already know this because you wrote the paper, right?
No, keep going.
But yeah, like those barriers can be so significant to people. And when they look at like, oh, what would I have to do to be an ISA certified arborist, or what would I have to do to get my MCA, which I'm even like, I don't know, when will I get my Massachusetts certified arborist license? It's harder to get than ISA. It can seem like a mountain. And that's for someone who has some experience. So if we're thinking about people who, nature can be most beneficial for returning citizens, folks who have had nature taken away from them for a period of time, or folks who grew up in an urban heat island who didn't have nature around them. Sometimes those jobs might be what they actually want, but they can't. It's like, it looks like a big mountain to climb to get to it. So thanks for sharing the credential. Yeah,
no, it's a really interesting like landscape, because at the same time, right, we want to make sure that because there are a lot of people also arguing sometimes that credentials should be harder to get even, and that like there are certified arborists out there that are doing really bad work and not representing the field. So that's a big problem as well too. I've heard like an interesting solution. I think that Sarah formerly Sarah and Lily Anderson, now Sarah Lily Sewell, who used to be at American Forest. She had talked a while about like the idea of creating kind of an entry-level credential, but I guess apprenticeship programs or something like that, or other ways to fill that gap, or the types of like entry-level internships you were talking about, because having that job experience in some ways is good enough for getting that first job, right? And then my beef is usually with employers who won't pay for their employees to get certified, because the cost is actually not high for an employer, but
Right.
to an individual, you have to weigh really weigh like your investment in yourself.
Thank you so much, Corey. Yeah, that's great comments. And what it makes me think of is that flip side of the coin where, I'm getting involved in a lot of like development processes and things where arborists are being called in to assess like how many trees are on this parcel and what's their value. The question is always what's their value, which I think we all know is very hard to quantify what that value is. But then like, the work that tree wardens are doing. I mean, in Boston, we have one tree warden and we have one other arborist. And then we have, I think, two other staff who are like more administrative in our parks division, forestry division. Like essentially what I'm saying is the Arnold Arboretum has more arborists, and that's one park in Boston, than the whole city does. So under investment in the experience that those people have, right? Like if you've spent 12 years, 15 years, 20 years in urban forestry and arboriculture, then to have someone from the public kind of like saying that you're not doing anything, or that you're not respecting or paying for the value of what you've worked to attain, that's a problem, I think, in the industry as well. One thing that relates to that is a reason why I'm super happy to be working for Mass Audubon is that they're investing in their early career staff. So I was able to go to the New England ISA Safety Day, which was a great safety training. I was able to sign up to attend the Women's Forest Congress in October this year. If anyone is interested in that, I'm going to try to present at that as well on something a little bit different, but definitely related to workforce and retention. So I switched roles this year. So I was like not retained from one company, but retained at another. A lot of it has to do with like, what is the livability of a certain wage, also for a nonprofit professional. So a lot of nonprofits hire urban forestry people. They may be under different names, like a conservation coordinator or something like that. But if those salaries aren't high enough to afford the rent of living in that city, if the forestry division laborer's rent is not high enough to afford supporting a family living in the city, then requiring that person to live in the city, you're going to be essentially like kind of like setting that person up for failure, even if they do have a wealth of experience or credentials. So a lot of things I like to think about.
Yeah. It's interesting when you're talking, because I don't know the Massachusetts situation, but I worked in California for a while, and I found that like the entry-level path to become like an urban forester, not an arborist, generally you had to start out either in tree care or at a nonprofit. But those entry-level nonprofit jobs where you're doing more urban forestry things like working with the community or making plans and stuff like that, they didn't actually pay as well as if you just went for a straight arboriculture path, right? You could like start making way more money on the tree care route, and you didn't need a bachelor's, but everyone with the entry-level nonprofit jobs like had a bachelor's, but could afford to be paid less for a little while. That's for sure that the privilege comparison there too.
Yeah, and it does eventually it does impact like who gets that next piece of their puzzle. Like if there was someone else who made that 6 picture, like what are the 6 jobs you had? If they dropped out of this industry at one of those points, it affects the composition of these conversations later, and who gets to go up to that next step. So I'm really excited to be working with PowerCore Boston. I think the PowerCore Philly, we're using their model essentially, and the city has invested. It was initially $4 million into that job training program, but looping those in and then also just constantly asking them, are you creating a sustainable job for people after your training program, like filling the gaps? It's just like academic research, like where's the next gap for individuals? So thank you, Nicole. Thanks for joining. And I hope, yeah, you found something to share with your team. That's great. Does anyone else have any last questions? We have about 2 minutes.
Hey, thanks so much, Erica. I won't be able to go to the Winners Congress, but I know a lot of my colleagues will, so I'm excited to meet you. One thing that I recently learned from our colleagues at Tree Pittsburgh is that calling it an internship is not great, but calling it a seasonal job is really helpful, and helpful to get more people in the door that maybe wouldn't otherwise, because it has very similar benefits to like what you described, luckily, but that term may be intimidating for other people, especially if they don't have like an academic background.
Absolutely, so key,
That's a good
especially
idea.
because of the history of unpaid internships for natural resource folks. That is such a key thing. So at Mass Audubon, we call our environmental fellowship program the environmental fellowship program, and then we call all of our other, like, we don't really have I don't think we have internships. We do have service members from TerraCore, which is like the closest thing I would say we have to a traditionally structured internship right now. And then PowerCore Boston, they call it, and this brings up a terminology thing, they call it a green workforce or a green jobs training program. And we usually have been talking about individuals as participants or students in that setting. But I really like, I mean, I hate to like my own creation if it is my own creation, but supportive environmental employment is really what I would love to see kind of take over. Like green workforce development is kind of a dehumanizing way of looking at things. Like you're trying to make a workforce, not a well-rounded person. Like the person is taken out of it. So instead of it being like, oh, I'm a fellow, like I have this title where I can say I'm proud to be like a worker at this company or given a full title. You know, when you say green workforce, I think workforce is just a little bit, that word is intimidating to me. But great comment, Becky. I think internship is a little minimizing and can be intimidating for others, yeah, because of that academic connection.
I've never heard that. I kind of disagree a little bit with the workforce thing, because I don't think that people are generally being like hired into a job title called with workforce in it, and it's usually more used when like the industry is analyzing like career pipelines and stuff like that. And I don't really know how much just changing that word like changes what you're talking about, but I really liked the supportive environmental job career. What was the term?
Supportive environmental employment. Just it's kind of vague. It's kind of like a
no. I like
thing.
No, I really like the like kind of the framework for that includes all the wraparound and the mentorship and stuff.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, I think it's great to disagree about terminology too. Like I think that's important because it's like we need to look at multiple angles of all of these different things to really lay what's going to come next. So thank you so much, Corey, Becky, everyone who's still here.
Thanks for your presentation. It was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erica. Thank you everyone for being on this call. I know some folks had to drop out already. We will be sending out the recording of this session. We will also send out the link to that article, Corey, and to the Jamboard, Erica. So you may see some more responses popping up there over the course of the next few days. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you all next month.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kinsey.
You're welcome.